So, you want to make a photo book? Google will give you a zillion results. Being only human, I have just one answer. Your photo book should show off your pictures, but also tell a story and be entertaining. A person should relish perusing your creation. I use BookWright, some free software from a company called Blurb, to assemble the book, but I use Photoshop to compose the pages. I'll briefly explore how to use just BookWright to make a photo book, but the main focus is on using Photoshop to make your books more memorable. Here are some sample pages from books I've made. Now let's drill down to a few pages. This is the front cover of a book. A single photo used in this way needs to be pretty dramatic. The titling uses a simple yet bold font. The title is outlined, which is a good practice to get into. I designed a common look for the title pages in this book, and it had these parts. A title box for the date, a map of the day's journey, a small number of photos, ideally only one, plus a summary of the day's highlights. Man, I went nuts with this one. I used Photoshop to insert the map, the routes, the curved lines, icons, and all those pictures. Yes, it took a long time, but it was worth it. Here's a tip. Look for real signs to use them as titles in your book. To make the photos stand out, I highlight virtually every photo, even if it's just outlining or shadowing. Even those dreaded posed photos can work. These folks are posed, but ready for action. They aren't just propped up in front of the Eiffel Tower with the rest of humanity. Plus, all images are all related to the same activity, including that sandy background. The stair-step effect adds movement even though there is none in the photos themselves. Sure, you could do a 2-page spread, but be aware of where the spine will obscure some of the image. This is the same 2-page spread as before, but this is how it looks while you're composing the page in Photoshop with some canvas guidelines in place. The guidelines show what part of the pages will be cut off around the edges as well as in the spinal gutter. Try doing this in Photoshop. Better yet, don't. You will go mad. Similarly, doing it with BookWright would be just as frustrating. I used Microsoft Word to create this textual piece, and then I sent it to PDF, which is the kid sister of Photoshop. To create your pages, you can just use BookWright. With it, you can create your book quickly, mainly because you have fewer decisions to make, but you have less creative control. With Photoshop, you have complete creative control, but it does take longer. To compose a page in Photoshop, you do not need to be a genius. I'm certainly not one. Here's a high-level list of to-dos if you want to just use BookWright to compose your book. We'll cover each of them in a minute. First of all, install BookWright and choose your book size. Next, plan your photo book by gathering all of your non-photo content, selecting the pictures, and arranging the content in order. Last, create the photo book by building each page in BookWright using your electronic content. Design the covers, upload the book, and order your copy. If you're using Photoshop, you'll do things a little bit differently. First, you'll need to also install Photoshop, and make what I call your starter PSD. More on that later. As part of the creation process, you'll need to create page-sized PSDs for each page in your book and for the covers. However, building the book in BookWright once you've generated the page-sized JPEGs is child's play. We'll cover option 1 first, where you just use BookWright to make your book. You'll need to register on Blurb's site, and then you can download the program and install it. Standard stuff, really. They have a Mac version too. Just look for it. Yeah, lots of stuff here. Freeze this frame to read it all if you need to. Just remember this. You have lots of page size, paper quality, and binding options to choose from. Each of those choices affects the cost of the final book. To save money, register on Blurb and wait for their frequent sales with up to 40% off. Never pay full price. You've got your computer ready. You're waiting for that 40% off coupon to show up. It's time to start planning your book. First, gather other stuff like ticket stubs, brochures, report cards, handwritten stuff, and news clippings. Convert them to electronic form. Your photos should be in the highest resolution possible with very little cropping done. Toss those junkers. The keepers can be anything that adds value to the book. They do not have to be Ansel Adams worthy. If you have several versions of the same shot, brutally cut it down to just a few. Categorize them however you want. Since you are making a book, aren't you? And not just a photo album, decide the flow of your story. Make an outline of the major parts of your book. Create the chunks of content that make up your story. My advice is to spend a lot of time on this step. Make several revisions. Sleep on it. Then recheck your work a few times. We'll go over most of these steps in a quick demo. We're going to create a new project, import the pictures we want to include, create a few sample pages, and then preview the book. Click on Books and Magazines. Click on your size of book. Choose your paper. Choose your cover. Put in something for the title, and we come up with this. To start with, you need to bring in all of your photos. Select them all. Click Open. For each page, you need to select a layout. So for this first page, it'll be our title page. We'll click on one photo, bring this down to here. Then the other thing you can do is click on this little icon to add a text box. That's pretty good. Now we need to fill those things with content. Click on Photos. We'll bring that down to there. Double click here. Change the size to something quite large. Click here. Type in your text. Select it. Change the color. Put in some outlining. Center it nicely. And we're going to call that page done. Click on this page. We'll give it a different layout. Do photo and text, for example. And on this other page, make it a 2-photo layout. Again, go back to Photos. Let's drag that to there. Drag that to there. Drag that to there. On this text box, again, double click on it. And you can put in some more text in this box. And we'll just say for at this point, we're fine with those pages. Now we need to build the covers. Click on Covers. He's already selected the hardcover image wrap, but we still need to specify some layouts, and this is a good one to use. So we're going to build the front cover, and just say we'll bring that one in, and then we'll bring that one to there. Click in the spine, type in whatever you want. Click in this part of the spine, put in whatever you want. Now we're going to say that our book is done. If you want to preview your book, come up to the upper right, click on Preview. You can spin through it. When you're done, click on Upload to upload your entire book project to Blurb, and then you have to go to the Blurb website to order your book. Now, we'll see how to use Photoshop to make your pages. Each page is created as a separate PSD file, and then a JPEG is generated when the PSD file is, quote, done. That JPEG shows exactly what you want the page to look like. I use Photoshop because its strong use of multiple layers allows a wealth of creativity. I always use a starter PSD to ensure that the generated JPEG is ready for insertion into BookWright as a full-page photo. It also has some pre-populated goodies. We'll provide more details on this critter later. Now, we are all prepped and ready to make our book. So let's lay out a page. This is the most creative aspect. Have fun with it, but be disciplined. First question, 1 page or 2. In general, reserve 2-page layouts for those cases where you have something really special to show off. The spinal gutter is unforgiving and sometimes very hard to accommodate. This slide shows you some of the more common things you will be placing on each page, and we'll see most of them in these demos. Woohoo! We're finally going to create our page. Don't get too excited though, this step is very anticlimactic. First, figure out the page number, or at least if it's even or odd. If there's an existing page that you know is a good starting point, open that. Otherwise, open a starter PSD. Think of a starter PSD as your base starting point. It will contain elements to quickly create pieces of your page. Once you have it open, make a copy of it. First of all, switch to the starter PSD. Now simply do a file save as and save it to pagenumber.psd. Tell yourself, this is an even page, or this is an odd page. You'll be surprised how often you forget this. Do you want page numbers? If so, hang around. If not, fast forward to the next slide. This slide shows the steps to make the page numbers appear. To light up the page numbers, the first thing you need to do is unhide this group called page numbers. After that's open, click each one of these, right-click, and duplicate it. On the odd page number, unhide it, unlock it, and move over here to the text tool. Click there, click once on the number, and now you can put 23 right there. Go back and click on the Move tool. Then also come back and lock that layer. I suggest building your background first. As a starting point, the slide shows the types of backgrounds that I've used in my books. If you download a background image, make sure it is large enough that it doesn't get unduly distorted when you try to fill the entire page with it. However, since a background isn't the main focus, sometimes you can get away with some loss of clarity. First, we will simply copy a very nondescript background into the backgrounds collection. We start out in 23.psd. We go to the backgrounds PSD. Here we have bamboo. Press Ctrl-C. Go back to where you want it. Press Ctrl-V. There it is. We will drag it into the images layer group, and we are done. Now we're going to use an image I found that I thought would look great on this particular page, because all of the photos we're going to put on this page were taken during a coffee tour. This is just a variation on the previous theme. We'll start out on 23PSD, then we'll click on the coffee mugs, click on the layer, press Ctrl-C, go back to 23PSD, press Ctrl-V, and now the layer is in there. Let's go ahead and double click on that, type in that, and now we have the beginnings of a customized background. Now let's go off the reservation. I want to be able to use the mug's image as a background for even and odd pages. And if used on facing pages, I want the backgrounds to appear as mirror images of each other. Sound tough? Yeah, you can do it. The first thing we need to do is to create a new layer group. Click on Images, New layer group, double click that, call it Mugs Mirror, and we'll move that group underneath the images, and we'll move coffee mugs into that new group. Next, we want to take this coffee mugs thing and name it something like base image. Right click on it, duplicate it, call it odd. Click on it, go up here to opacity, change that to 32%. Come back down to odd, Control C, Control V, double click on it, rename it to even. Now we have two layers that each have 32% opacity. On the even layer, you want to click on Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. That's kind of strange, isn't it? We're not quite done yet. First of all, let's zoom out so you can take a full look at what's going on. The even layer is active. The move tool is active. Now, using the arrow keys, move this layer to the left until its right edge lines up with the right edge of the canvas. Now we really do have mirror images of each other. There's the odd image, and that's the even image. In case you care, here's what the two backgrounds look like when used on opposing pages. For each photo, you'll need to open the JPEG in Photoshop, copy and paste it into your page.psd file, crop and transform as needed. Lastly, add effects such as stroke and outlining, drop shadow, bevel, and emboss. Be consistent and be restrained. The first thing we want to do is bring in a closely cropped version of a photo. We will go over to Crush Beans, click on the rectangular marquee, select off a closely cropped version of this photo, press Ctrl C, go back to 23.psd, press Ctrl V, and there it is. It's been copied in, but we need to move it around just a little bit. So we'll move over, click on the Move tool, that highlights this photo, and we will drag it up to the upper right-hand corner, grab this little sizing bar, hit the Shift key to size it proportionally, and that's good enough. The last thing you need to do is come up here and hit the checkbox, or you can simply hit the Enter key. For the raw beans image, we're going to go off the reservation again. We're going to use a special matting to present the photo framed with an element that resembles a film strip. First thing, go over here to the matting section, hide it, expand it, take this thing that says film strip white opaque sprocket holes, copy and paste it, rename it to something else. Next, unlock that, unhide it, expand it, and unlock each of the layers. Next, select all three layers and move them down to here. Now, select just the photo area and then come over here to the Raw Beans JPEG. Hit Ctrl A to select it all, Ctrl C to copy it, go back to the PSD, Ctrl V, and now we have the picture. Now comes the magic. Notice first that the photo is exactly above the photo area. With this layer selected, go to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. Do you see what happened? Basically, this area is now the only area where the photo is showing up. However, that doesn't look very good. So what we need to do is resize and reposition that background picture so that we get the image that we want in this little area here. So we go up to the top, hold the Shift key to resize the image, move it to where we want. We're almost there. Move it a little bit more, and I would say we're done. For the mashed beans photo, the bowl in the photo is essentially an ellipse. We're going to crop it using the elliptical marquee to create a uniquely shaped crop. This is, admittedly, a little bit tricky to do. First of all, bring up the mashed beans photo. Secondly, go over here to the left. You don't need the rectangular marquee, you need the elliptical marquee. Move down to where the bowl is and make your best guess at an ellipse. It does not have to be perfect at this point. And that's because the next thing we can do is go up over here to Select, Transform Selection. Now, if you look at this area, you see a bunch of marching ants, but most importantly, you see these vertices. Move these vertices up and down so that you get the definition that you want on the bowl. The reason we can do it this way, and the reason it works, is because somebody at Adobe really figured out what we wanted. The reason this works really well for this picture is because over here on the right side we have this little flat edge, which would be very difficult if we tried to use traditional selection techniques like select subject or something like that. So we can also move this up just a shade. Refine it as good as you want. In this particular case, that's as close as we need. Again, press the Enter key or go up here and press the check mark, and that locks the selection. Control C, go back to the original page, tell them where you want it. Control V, boom, we got it. But of course, we are not done yet. Be careful because the elliptical marquee is still selected. In this case, we need to use the Move tool. Press the Shift key, make this guy a little bit smaller, and move him where we want. And we're going to say that's maybe right there. Good enough. For this photo and for this photo, we'd like to apply some photo effects to make them pop out from the page. So let's click on this photo first, which is here. We go down to Effects, add a layer style, click on Blending Options, click on Stroke, click on the word stroke to get the settings. We have 3 pixels, which is what we want. We want the color to be 000, which is black. And we want to give them a drop shadow. Click on that too. And we want this drop shadow to be 20 pixels. That looks pretty good. Now, we'd like this photo to have the same effect as this photo. And the easiest way to do that is to click on the first photo that has all the cool effects you want. Right-click, click on Copy Style, click on your target, right-click, paste layer style, and now they look exactly the same. Not every page deserves a title or a subtitle, but they are a good idea more often than you might think. By definition, titles are a few words, like 4 or less, and they fit on just one line. We're going to place a title to the right of the top photo. The first thing to do is to unhide the titles section, unhide the titles group, expand it, take the Britannic bold section, copy and paste it, move it up underneath the title, hide these guys, unlock that, And now we can start doing something with this title. The first thing we can do, with the Move tool selected, we can simply move it to where we want. In order to actually change the text, you have to click on the Text tool or press the letter T, and then click anywhere in the body of the text itself. Go to the front, select it all, and we're going to say from beans to mash. With the Move tool selected, you can then move this block to where you want. If you want to change the effects, you would select it in the list, go down to blending options, and you can see that all of these options are now selected. This is what comes in as part of the starter PSD. It has some bevel and emboss, outer glow, drop shadow. The only thing that I think I would like to do is add a stroke to it of, let's say, 3 pixels, and again, we'll go with our favorite black. If you'd like to change the color of the font, again, you'll have to click on the Text tool, click anywhere, go to the beginning, select it all, go right here to change the color, and we'll change it to something like that. Use captions to further the story, or add levity, or call attention to something important. Captions utilize paragraph text because you can resize the bounding box and get automatic word wrapping. We want to place a caption over the upper left photo. Let's see how we can do that. Go to the caption section, unhide it, expand it, go down to where you think your fonts are. Look at all those fonts. Pretty cool, huh? Expand that. We'll take whatever that one is. Control C to copy, Control V to paste. Move it up to the top of the captions. Hide everything else, collapse everything else. Unlock that layer. Now we have this text box with some sample text. To change the text, come over here to the tools, click on horizontal type tool, come back here, select all that, and we'll say Sally ground up the beans. Now, in order to move this, we have to click on this guy, move it from where it is up to where we want. And you have two choices now. You can actually go in here and say Sally ground, and hit the enter key, hit the enter key, beans, and it would be just fine. Now you might think that you can go over to here and click this sizing bar right here and move it over to there. And see what happens? It all gets scrunched up. Control Z to undo that. To get proper text wrapping, you have to have the text tool selected. The layer needs to be active. Now you can move this over and things start to flow the way we want. You can go to the beginning of this and select it all and change it to some other color if you wish. Basically, at this point, you're done. This type of element is similar to captions, with the exception that you usually have much more text. The font is the smallest used anywhere, and there is no attempt to make the content command your attention. However, I always format journal text with an outline so it can be more easily read against any background. First, we'll place a rectangular piece of content. To start with, we go to the journal text, expand it, unhide it. We'll take this layer, copy and paste it, move it up to the top. We'll unhide that one. Now we'll be just working with this copy. you'll notice at this point that the Move tool is selected. If we want to do anything with this layer, probably need to click on the Text tool. To bring in new content, we'll actually go to where our content is, select it all. With the Text tool selected, click in the text box, Control A to select it all, Control V to paste in what we had. Now, all of that text came in and is properly formatted. With the Text tool selected, we can now change the sides and get this thing positioned where we want without having to retype it all. That's it. Well, you know, that's not really it, because this is not a very good representation of journal text, now is it? After all, we have that plate of beans hidden behind it. I think we can do a little better than this. So again, it's time to go off the reservation. Normally, the container that holds the text is a simple rectangle, as you see here, that can be easily resized and moved. With some extra work, you can make the text-bounding container to be, within reason, any shape you want. It's tricky, but it looks way cool when you do it right. First, let's hide this last layer that we just created. We want to create a custom container that starts about here, flows back and forth, goes around the plate, comes back over here, and keeps flowing until we run out of text. So how do we pull that off? For the elliptical plate, we'd like to reduce its opacity so we can more easily draw around it. So we will open the Photos layer, click on that layer, change the opacity to something like 30%. Here's where it starts to get a little dicey. We're going to come over to the toolbar and we're going to click on the Pen tool. Go up to the top, make sure it says Shape, No Fill, a stroke of just 1 pixel. Now, take the pen over here and we're going to start about right here. Let's zoom in so you can see it a little better. All you need to do is click for the first vertex, then go to the next one, and when you still have it clicked, stretch it out to get the angle that you want. Then you do that same thing all the way around. And it really doesn't have to be that close at all, because all we're doing is we're telling the system where not to put the text. All right, that's pretty close right there. Move down. With this one highlighted, hit the Shift key, come down to here. With the Shift key, go over to here. We go up, hit the Shift key to about there, hit the Shift key to about there, and then click this one. And actually, this looks pretty darn straight. If it didn't look straight, here's what you could do. Go to the toolbar, and you want to select the Direct Selection tool. And you're going to click on that vertex and use the arrow keys to move it back and forth. Here's the tricky part. This is not something you would ever think of doing. Right now you have this whole weird shaped contraption selected. Go over here to the toolbar and click on the horizontal type text tool. You cannot see it on the screenshot, but the cursor has changed to an I-bar with a circle around it, as opposed to an I-bar with a square around it. With the cursor where it is, when you click here, it creates a brand new text layer that flows around this shape. And all of that text is selected. So again, all you have to do is go to where your content is, Control A to select it, Control C to copy it. All of this stuff is already selected. Control V, and boom, there it is. One suggestion that I would make is, since you have a little bit of brokenness on this side, put the cursor anywhere in the text box, hit Control A to select it, come over here to the properties, and under paragraph, let's do justified last left. That kind of makes it look a little better. And the last thing you want to do is, even though the shape is there and it's a good thing and everything needs it to flow the text out, we really don't want to see it. So we'll click on the shape and we will hide it, and look at that magic. Is that cool or what? I lied. There is one more thing we need to do. We need to click on the elliptical plate and change the opacity back to 100%. Now we are officially done. Just got to save our work now. Save your PSD. Save it as a high-res JPEG. Since our photos make the biggest impact, let's see a few other ways for creatively adding your photos. So the first thing we want to do is bring in this thing called the Street Curve JPEG. Select on it, Control C. On the PSD we're working on, Control V, and there it is. Now we're going to actually resize it so that its height is the same as my page, but we don't worry about the right side. Okay, so we've got this white spot over here we need to do something with. I think I have something that will work. We'll go to the backgrounds. See this flagstone? Copy. Paste. And we will put the flagstone behind the picture. Now, I will admit that I did not choose this background just by chance. It actually is a close enough match in color to their overall tone of the street curb scene that I think I can do something pretty cool with it. And now is the time for some pixie dust. We're going to blend these two images together for a pretty nice effect. First thing, click on the street curb scene. Then we're going to go down here. I'm going to click on this thing that says Add a Layer Mask. Then we're going to move over here and select the Gradient tool. Up here, we want to select this thing that is foreground to transparent, which is what this is. Now we will move the cursor to the right edge and simply drag a few times until we get rid of that hard edge. Not too shabby. I didn't do this demo just to prove that it could be done. I really have this page in one of my books. I like the angular line of the street curve, but in order to show the entire curve, the resulting photo was far too narrow. So I floundered around trying to figure out how to fill that ugly white void on the right. I happened upon the flagstone background, and then things started to click. Now we're going to create what I call boxed captions. There's already a few layers in this captions layer group that help you out. So we'll click on the box captions. This one lights up. This is a group. We will click on it, right click, say duplicate the group. That's fine. We will hide that group so we don't mess around with it. Expand that. Then as you click on each one of these, you can change the contents of the actual box caption. Vertical line, we don't have to, the vertical line is actually that content that's in the vertical area there. Hit the horizontal text tool, go over here and we'll select it all and say of. The top line is going to say streets, and the bottom line is going to say Wellington. Streets of Wellington. Not too bad. Let's bring in a photo now and rotate it a little bit. So we'll go to the beanbag chairs. We will click on the rectangular marquee and snip out what I think is a pretty good shot of some people lounging in the sun. We select all that, do a Control C, go back to our page, press Control V, and there it is. We need to click on the Move tool to move it around, put it over here, and while you have it selected, if you look right there, you'll see that the cursor is turned to a little rotation symbol. It may or may not show up on the screen capture, but it turn it around like that, and that's pretty good. Press the Enter key to accept it. Okay, let's play with these effects a little bit. First of all, let's go to the crane, and we'll use the elliptical marquee, and let's kind of get a good sized portion of this. We'll remember our select, transform the selection to move it over a little bit, and that looks pretty good. Hit the checkbox, Control C, go back to our page, hit Control V, and it's awfully big. So we need to resize it. Click on this guy, Shift, make it smaller, move it, and that's pretty good like that. Press the Enter key, and at least it's well placed. Now we're going to play around with some of these effects. With this layer selected, we can click on the effects, click on blending options, and we'll just do a quick look-see and see if we can figure out what any of this stuff does. Basically, the picture here will change as you change the settings over here. We have something called inner bevel, outer bevel. Let's see if we can see any difference there. Nothing there. We'll turn that off. We've already talked about stroke, and we can see that the size of the stroke changes. It can be on the outside, or it can be on the inside, or it can be on the center, if it makes any sense. Okay, so we have that. We have something called satin. Check this out. Ooh, very neat. I have no idea what you'd ever use half this stuff for. You can figure all this out. You're doing a lot better than me. Outer glow. I have used this a few times. This is pretty cool. You get a little bit of a outer glow on the back, on the outside of it like that. That's pretty neat. Sometimes I use that. And then we've seen the drop shadow quite often. Distance there will lengthen the drop shadow. You can use whichever of those you want.
Surprise! You create the covers in exactly the same way as you create the interior pages. The only difference, and it is critical, is that the starter PSD for covers has a larger canvas size because the covers are physically larger than the pages. Do not forget this. Once you have all the pages and covers built, and you have all those JPEGs, use BookWright to assemble the book. It's boringly easy to do. The big difference in this demo compared to the earlier one is that we will just be slapping one big old photo on each page, and that photo will cover the page from edge to edge.
Click on Books and Magazines, click on your book size, choose your paper, choose your cover, put in something for the title. Again, we go over and click on Browse for Photos. We bring in all of these. We'll click on the first page, And in this case, we need to click on the layout. And the layout we want to use for all of our pages is this one. Click on the photos, and the title page for this book looks like this. Pretty nice. For this page, we're going to make it black. This page, we're going to give it a layout of a full page. And then we're going to take this page, right-click, say copy, right-click again, paste, and you'll see it says Control-Alt-V. So we're going to do Control-Alt-V, V, 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 V. Now all of our pages are properly formatted. We can go back to this page, click on the photos. Now we start having our real pages. We'll just drag that one to there, drag that one to there, drag that one to there. I should point out that these little purple areas are the areas that you don't want stuff in because it's likely to get cut off. So what if you have a two-page layout? The first thing you need to do is move this layout onto the two pages, and then take your two-page layout, which is this guy, move it down, and there you go. For the covers, we do it the same way as we did in our previous demo. Click on the covers. This is already selected. For our layouts, again, we want to take this layout. By clicking on it, it just moved it in. Now we need to put something into those covers. And I have some nice covers. We'll put that on the front cover. We'll put that on the back cover. Click here, put in whatever title you want, or spinal stuff, same thing there. Preview the book. Again, we would upload and then order the book from Blurb. Let's dive a bit deeper. Just what exactly is this thing called a starter PSD? It's a template on steroids. BookWright needs full-page JPEGs to be an exact size. You need some starter content to make your life easier. Thus, the starter PSD was born. A starter PSD has the correct canvas size, is 300 dpi, and uses sRGB color profile. That's the stuff that BookWright cares about. Then you create layer groups and populate it with stuff that makes your life easier. You need a separate starter PSD for the cover and another for the interior pages of each differently sized book. As you start to create your own starter PSD, use this info to specify the canvas size. Use 300 dpi and the sRGB color profile. FYI, this info was posted back in 2010 and is no longer available that I know of, but it is still valid. Comparable, though not exact information, can be found at the URL shown in the slide. The starter PSD should have these canvas guidelines: a top and bottom horizontal guideline at a 1/4 inch or more from the top and bottom edge, a center horizontal guideline at the middle, a total of 6 vertical guidelines, 2 near the left edge, 2 near the center, and 2 near the right edge using the dimensions shown in the slide. The yellow guidelines are used in positioning content on even numbered pages, and the green ones are used on odd numbered pages. Don't fall in love with those colors, however. Photoshop uses the same color for all canvas guidelines. Keep your content within the appropriate guidelines to keep stuff from being cut off. I suggest you make the layer groups shown here and in this order. Within each layer group, add layers that can be used to quickly create new layers of the type indicated in the layer group name. I leave the photos and maps sections empty. During the demos, we saw how most of the layer groups were used. We'll see some suggested content for each of these layer groups, but these are just a starting point. Make your starter PSD your own by adding stuff that works for you. These layers ensure that all page numbers are formatted and positioned uniformly. Use the details here to create your own page number layers. To be clear, at most only one of the two layers, either odd or even, will be unhidden on a given page. The titles group can get pretty big as you add more font and formatting examples. Within the titles group, use multiple layer groups from the outset. Then you can see many font samples at once, but avoid overcrowding. I use the font name in the sample text to quickly map the examples to the name of each layer. I allow Photoshop to insert its lorem ipsum sample text into each layer when I create them. I only use white or black fonts with an optional black or white 3-pixel outside stroke. I rarely use any variation other than those shown here. Like the titles group, the captions group can also get pretty big. I vary the color and effects to remind myself that captions often use more vibrant colors and effects than my title elements. I put the font name and a standard phrase in each layer to quickly see what the font name is and to see how the font handles every character. The crazier fonts sometimes really mess with some letters. In addition to simple text boxes, try designing some boxed captions that can add some pop to your captions. Each collective effect, as I call them, is stored in a separate layer group that can be quickly enabled. My boxed captions have a few layers that contain text and other layers that are intended to be changed only rarely. I start out by making a copy of the effects layer group and then I modify that copy. The use of this special matting was shown in the demos. Building the actual layers is very tedious, but not impossible. Use this same concept to build your own frames with clipping mask style layers. The rectangles container is used to store some mattings with pre-selected effects. They're really nothing special. Make a copy of one and modify it, and then place it behind your text or photo. Fiddle with the blending options to make it unique. Similarly, the other shapes container is used to store other mattings that are a bit fancier than just rectangles. I created several layers and then grouped them to let me quickly modify whatever background I build for a page. I place my real background stuff below these modifiers and turn on whatever modifier I want. At the very bottom, the solids layer group has a few full-page mattings of single colors. The black and white versions are handy when you have background layers with some transparency, as these solid layers will lighten and darken the whole image. Because this file can be quite large, I suggest you make a separate starter PSD just for your growing collection of backgrounds. We saw a few of them in the demos so far, and we'll see some others soon. The backgrounds PSD should contain more than just several large images. This slide and the next ones demonstrate how to build some creative backgrounds fairly simply. Here we've simply grouped together several small layers to make an interesting pattern. In this case, it was okay to enlarge the base image to fill the screen, especially since we changed the opacity to only 66%. We used Edit Transform to reduce only the height, giving the final image a more compressed texture. The use of a single filter operation can yield some impressive results. Here's some extra goodies that you might find helpful. First, use Google Images to find background, signage, and all kinds of stuff. Do honor the copyrights of the owners and be careful to watch out for very faint watermarks on some images. I'll bet you've never heard of these. Plotter Route allows you to zoom in on a map of anywhere in the world and quickly create a pretty nice JPEG of the route you took on a trip. Print My Fonts is a single executable that prints out a sample phrase using all or a selected subset of the fonts on your Windows PC only. I know of no way for Windows 10 to display thumbnails for PSD files within File Explorer. For $10, you can make it happen. Fast Picture Viewer Codec displays the thumbnail that is saved in some PSDs. Newer releases of Photoshop do not save this thumbnail by default. After installing this utility, you must edit your preferences as shown here. Then, all PSDs you save from now on will have an image thumbnail show up in File Explorer at the expense of taking up more disk space.